Good morning. Welcome to day 38 of Bible in a Year as we go through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in 365 days. We're going through the greatest love story ever told, that being the Bible, which is a love story between God and his people. We're going through the New International Version and the Adventure Timeline created by Jeff Cavins. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz, and we are going through the period of Egypt and Exodus. We'll begin with the Exodus 19 to 20, Leviticus Chapter 13, and Psalm 74. Exodus chapters 19 to 20 talks about the Israelites arriving at the desert of Sinai, Moses going up to the mountain, and then God wanting Moses to consecrate the people for 3 days leading up to his appearance to them. And then chapter 20, Moses receives the 10 Commandments and other such laws. Leviticus 13, the Lord outlines for Moses and Aaron the regulations before the tent of meeting about infectious skin diseases and contamination of clothing, especially in the buildup of mildew. And lastly, Psalm 74 is called a Maskil of Asaph. So Asaph was the family line that I had spoken of before. And a maskil is most likely a literary or a musical term. So remember, psalms are different types of psalms. And this is a psalm of petition, lamenting before God. All right, so let us start into Exodus chapters 19 to 20. Chapter 19. In the 3rd month after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai, after they had set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai. And Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did in Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people, and set before them all the words of the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speak with you, and will always put their trust in you." And Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready for the 3rd day. Because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not go up the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. He shall surely be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on him. Whether man or animal, he shall not be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they go up to the mountain." After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them. They washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, "Prepare yourselves for the 3rd day. Abstain from sexual relations." On the morning of the 3rd day there was a thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God. And they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it, like smoke from a furnace. The whole mountain trembled violently, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Then Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people, so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai, because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them. And God spoke all these words. Chapter 20. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, a land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything, in heaven above, or on earth below, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation, and those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, or your maidservant, nor your animals, nor the aliens within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or manservant or maidservant, his ox or donkeys, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And when the people saw the thunder and lightning, and heard the trumpets, and saw the mountain and smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." People remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this: You have seen for yourself that I have spoken to you from the heavens. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourself gods of silver or gold. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice it on your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, do not build it with dressed stone, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, lest your nakedness be exposed on it." Our next reading comes from Leviticus Chapter 13. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "When anyone has a swelling or a rash or a bright spot on his skin that may become an infectious skin disease, he must be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons who is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore on his skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be more than skin deep, it is an infectious skin disease. When the priest examines him, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. If the spot on his skin is white, but does not appear to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it is not turned white, the priest is to put the infectious person in isolation for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine him, and if he sees that the sore is unchanged and has not spread in the skin, he is to keep him in isolation another 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest is to examine him again, and if the sore is faded and has not spread to the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a rash. The man must wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the rash does spread in his skin, after he has shown himself to the priest to pronounce clean, he must appear before the priest again. The priest is to examine him, and if the rash is spread in the skin, he shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infectious disease. When anyone has an infectious skin disease, he must be brought to the priest. The priest is to examine him, and if there is a white swelling in the skin, that has turned the hair white, and if there is a raw flesh in the swelling, it is a chronic skin disease, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He is not to put him in isolation because he is already unclean. If the disease breaks out all over his skin, and so far as the priest can see, it covers all the skin of the infectious person from the head to foot, the priest is to examine him. And if the disease has covered his whole body, he shall pronounce that person clean. Since it has all turned white, he is clean. But whenever raw flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. When the priest sees the raw flesh, he shall pronounce him unclean. The raw flesh is unclean. He has an infectious disease. Should the raw flesh change and turn white, he must go to the priest. The priest is to examine him, and if the sores have turned white, the priest shall pronounce the infectious person clean. Then he will be clean. When someone has a boil on his skin and it heals, and in the place where the boil was, a white, swelling, reddish-white spot appears, he must present himself to the priest. The priest is to examine, and if it appears to be more than a skin deep, the hair in it has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It's an infectious disease that has broken out where the boil was. But if when the priest examines there is no white hair in it, and is not more than skin deep, and it has faded, then the priest is to put him in isolation for 7 days. If it is spreading in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. If it is infectious, it is infectious. But if the spot is unchanged and is not spread, it is only a scar from the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When someone has a burn on his skin, and a reddish white or white spot appears in the raw flesh of the burn, the priest is examine the spot, and if the hair in it has turned white, and if it appears more than skin deep, it is an infectious disease that is broken out in the burn. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an infectious skin disease. But if the priest examines it, and there is no white hair in the spot, and if it is not more than skin deep and is faded, then the priest is to put him in isolation for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine him, and if it is spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. If it's an infection, it is an infectious skin disease. If, however, the spot is unchanged and is not spread in the skin, but is faded, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or on the chin, the priest is to examine the sore, and if it appears to be more than skin deep, and the hair in it is yellow and thin, the priest shall pronounce that person unclean. It is an itch, an infectious disease on the head or chin. But if, when the priest examines this kind of sore, it does not seem to be more than skin deep, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest is to put the infectious person in isolation for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine the sore. If the itch is not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and it does not appear to be more than skin deep, then he must be shaved except for the diseased area, and the priest is to keep him in isolation another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest is to examine the itch, and if it is not spread in the skin, and appears to be no more than skin deep, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He must wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the itch does spread in the skin, and after he is pronounced clean, the priest is to examine him, and if the itch is spread in the skin, the priest does not need to look for yellow hair. The person is unclean. If, however, in his judgment it is unchanged, and black hair is grown in it, the itch is healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. When a man or woman has white spots on the skin, the priest is to examine them, and if the spots are dull white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. That person is clean. When a man has lost his hair and is bald, he is clean. If he has lost his hair in the front of his scalp and has a bald forehead, he is clean. And if he has a reddish-white sore on his bald head or forehead, it's an infectious disease breaking out on his head or forehead. The priest is to examine him, and if the swollen sore on his head or forehead is a reddish-white, like that of an infectious skin disease, the man is diseased and is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean because of the sore on his head. Priest with such an infectious disease must wear torn clothes. The person with such an infectious disease must wear torn clothes, let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of his face, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. Regulations for mildew. If any clothes is contaminated with mildew, any woolen or linen cloth, any woven or knitted material of linen or wool, any leather or anything made of leather, and if the contamination in the clothing or leather or woven or knitted material, or any leather article is greenish or reddish, it is a spreading mildew. It must be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the mildew and isolate the affected article for 7 days. On the 7th day he is to examine it, and if the mildew is spread in the clothing, or the woven or knit material, or the leather, or whatever it is, it is a destructive mildew. Article is unclean. He must burn up the clothing, or the woven or knitted material of wool or linen, or any leather article that has been contaminated. Because the mildew is destructive, the article must be burned up. But if when the priest examines it, the mildew is not spread in the clothing, or the woven or knitted material, or the leather article, he shall order that the contaminated article be washed. Then he is to isolate it for another 7 days. After the affected article has been washed, the priest is to examine it. If mildew has not changed its appearance, even though it is not spread, it is unclean. Burn it with fire, whether the mildew has affected one side or the other. If when the priest examines it, the mildew has faded after the article has been washed, he is to tear the contaminated part out of the clothing, or the leather, or the woven or knitted material. But if it appears in the clothing, or in the woven or knitted material, or in the leather article, it is spreading, and whatever has the mildew must be burned with fire. The clothing, or the woven, or the knitted material, or the leather article that has been washed and is rid of mildew must be washed again, and it will be clean. These are the regulations concerning contamination by mildew in woolen or linen clothing, woven or knitted material, or any leather article, for pronouncing them clean or unclean. Our last reading comes from Psalm 74. Why have you rejected us forever, O God? Why does your anger smolder against the sheep of your pasture? Remember the people you purchased of old, the tribe of your inheritance, whom you redeemed, Mount Zion, where you dwell. Turn your steps towards these everlasting ruins. All this destruction the enemy has brought on the sanctuary. Your foes roar in the place where you meet with us. They set up their standards as signs. They behave like men wielding axes. They cut through a thicket of trees. They smash all the carved paneling with their axes and hatchets. They burn your sanctuary to the ground. They defile the dwelling place of your name. They said in their hearts, we will crush them completely. They burned every place where God was worshipping in the land. We are given no miraculous signs, no prophets are left, and none of us know how long this will be. How long will the enemy mock you, O God? Will the foe revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the folds of your garment and destroy them. But you, O God, are my king from of old. You bring salvation upon the earth. It was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monsters in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave him as food to the creatures of the desert. It was you who opened up springs and streams. You dried up the ever-flowing rivers. The day is yours, and yours also the night. You established the sun and the moon. It was you who set all the boundaries of the earth. You made both summer and winter. Remember how the enemy has mocked you, O Lord, how foolish people have reviled your name. Do not hand over the life of your dove to wild beasts. Do not forget the lives of your afflicted people forever. Have regard for your covenant, because haunts of violence fill the dark places of the land. Do not let the oppressed retreat in disgrace. May the poor and needy praise your name. Rise up, O God, and defend your causes. Remember how fools mock you all day long. Do not ignore the clamor of your adversaries, the uproars of your enemies, which rises continually. So this is the end of the reading of Psalm 74. This is a psalm reminding God of his people to not forget the poor and the needy, but that they also need to praise his name. This is a song of petition that God might come and save them. We see in many places where God comes to save his people. He cares for his people, as we see in Leviticus 13. He goes through all the different types of infectious skin disease in order that they might take care of those people who are sick properly. And give them the proper treatment that's needed for that time. And then we hear about in Exodus, the Mount Sinai, about how God consecrates his people and he prepares them. He loves them and cares for them, and he wants to see them face to face. And so he has them prepare for 3 days in order to come up to the mountain to see him. And the people still, after going up, are scared. It says, but Moses gives them assurance. He says, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you and keep you from sinning." Remember that God loves us, and that we should not be afraid of God. That God has at times may test us to keep us from sinning. He wants us to be perfect before him, and he brings all these things. He brings us the 10 Commandments and all these other ordinances in order that we do not sin against him, that we might have good relationship with him and with one another. That's my prayer for today, that you continue to seek God, that you do not look to him with fear, but that you know that he is there to care and love for you, and that he puts these laws in place in order that we might be in good relationship with him and with others. May you pray for me as we go through this Bible in a year, and I pray for you that you might grow in the wisdom and understanding and fear of the Lord. Well, have a wonderful day. God bless.